Hi gang, just want to show you some tools that you can use for testing your application. Um, and I provided additional servlets for you, and I just want to make sure that you have those here. Here they are right here. Okay, so inside of your student files, inside of your admin, here, let me go this way. All the way to your 4368 student files, inside of web-inf, and then inside of classes and CRUD and admin, you have your basic customer servlet.java file here. And then I gave you three other, uh, if you will, utility files. One is specifically called servlet utilities and show parameters.java. Now, I did not create those files. I've been using those files for a number of years, or variations thereof. I've created my own versions of utility files as well too. But I had these for a number of years. Oh geez, 20 years now. Next year anyway. Um, Actually, this year, 1999 was when the book came out. Marty Hall's book on Java Server Pages and Servlets, the first edition. And he included these two utility files, servlet utilities and show parameters. And I'm going to demonstrate those two files. The one that also that I gave you was test servlet. Um, so when you cloned the set of student files, you had all these at your disposal. The test servlet is really just a small file just to make sure that you know how to compile servlets and run the servlets, and to make sure your environment is working, Java's installed properly, Tomcat's installed properly, etc. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you show parameters. I'm not going to do show servlet utilities. You can go there and open up that file on your own. Again, it's not my code. It's something I've been using for a number of years. Marty Hall in his files, in the show parameters files, which I'll show you here in a second, he says that you can freely use it and distribute it. So it's just a very cool set of tools to use for testing your Java Server Pages and Servlets application. Now, how is it going to be tested? Well, what I provided for you, um, and I did modify the show parameters file actually. I'll show you that in a second, according to what he had originally. Um, if you look at my line 103, now yours is probably going to be different, but I'm in the customer form.jsp file. So just so that you know where we're at here physically, if you go back to the root of the application, student files, there's customer form. This is the file that I'm opened up right now. And at this point, we're completing assignment 5. So um, regardless, you could actually have used this in assignment 4 to be truthful for testing purposes. Now this, again, this line 103 is just showing you that you would need to use the testing tools, the files that I just showed. All you would need to do is just to change the action in the line below. So change the action in the line below to test input instead of, or in lieu of, customer admin. So let's do that right now. I'm going to notice that line 103 is really just a Java Server Pages comment. That's all it is, right? It says for debugging, test input, test servlet provided, and I'm going to show the test servlet in a second. Now our file, our servlet, is actually pointing to the annotated customer admin. And that's not the actual name of the servlet, as you remember in prior videos. Just like, by the way, just like test input is not the actual name of the servlet, which you'll see here in a second. All right, let's let me go here, and I already have this in memory. So I guess now I must have opened it. Anyway, let me just capture this, and I changed it before, so, and let let me put this back over here so that we still have this and we can use it, but it's in comments right now. So what this form is actually going to be pointing to at this point is to the servlet known as test input. Well, just so that you know, the servlet's known as test input is actually, go to web-inf, go to classes, go to CRUD, go to admin. It's actually going to be the show parameters servlet. Now, show parameter servlet is also going to call the servlet utilities. And so what I'm going to do now is go to my version of that just to show you how it will compile. So here's mine, not student underscore files, but my actual 4368. I go to web-inf, go to classes, go to CRUD, go to admin, and you see that the only thing I have compiled right now is the actual customer servlet. And as you remember in a prior video, in the customer servlets, we're using a web annotation, right, that we could use since Web 3.0. And that web annotation allows us to call the servlet name can be named anything we want to, but when we actually call it, because of the web annotation, we can actually call it using a different name. And here, let me refresh your memory on that. Notice that I'll make this larger. Notice using the web servlet mapping for servlet 3.0, we could actually call this whatever we want to. And I said this before in another video, so I'm not going to belabor this issue, but notice that in the form here, we're not actually calling the name of the servlet, which is customer servlet, right? We're not calling that. What we're calling is, well, in this case, test input. But before then, we were calling it customer admin. We were making a call to customer admin. And how did that work? Just like this in line 33 of the customer servlet.java file. And then we compile it, of course. But that's how we can annotate it using the servlet mapping and call it whatever we want to. And then all we have to do then is in our form, the action, we have to make sure that that action here is actually pointing to the test input. Now there's some other code going on here too, and I explained this in another video. And all that is this page context.request.context path. All that's doing is getting the context path of where this servlet resides. And the context path really here is 4368. So I really could have done something like this. Instead of using this, I used this way because in case I move the file. But I really could have done something like this, right? LIS4368. Okay, that's really the context path in this particular situation. But if I move this file, then it won't have the same context of LIS4368, and that's why we use this built-in code right here to automatically find the context path of this application. All right, so it's pointing to test input. Now, where is our test input? Well, it's actually right here. And as I mentioned, I'll make this larger. As I mentioned, the file name is actually show parameters. Okay? If you look in the lower left corner here, where I got my cursor, it says show parameters.java. But because we're using the servlet mapping that we can as of Web Servlet 3.0, I'm saying we're going to call this test input. We're going to test the input of this file. Now, if I modify this servlet to do something else, I could call it something else without ever changing the actual name, the physical name of the file. Again, the physical name is show parameters, but to call it, we're going to make a call to test input, and that's why I have test input here in the form element. Make that a little bit larger. In this form element, the ID is add_customer form. That's for CSS and some JavaScript. The method is post. The class is for bootstrap form hyphen horizontal, and then the action says when the user submits this form, it's going to go to test input. Now, it's not going to work right now because it's not compiled. Um, and as I mentioned to you, the file show parameters also requires servlet utilities. Now, again, I'm not going to go into all of the code here. Just realize that it was created by Marty Hall. Here's the documentation for that. Back in 1999, by the way. And this line here on this URL, line 17, doesn't even work anymore. It worked for a number of years. I'm sure you could do an internet search on Marty Hall, but he was one of the premier developers, educators on Java Server Pages and Servlets when Java first came out with the technology. And by the way, Microsoft copied a lot of Java's um, functionality of how Java operated internally with the Java Server Pages and Servlets, and ASPX actually specifically the .NET version. The old .ASP didn't incorporate the same. It used VB script, but the newer .NET really took a lot of functionality and kind of backward engineered how Java Server Pages and Servlets worked, and that's why it's it's compiled now. You can use VB or C# to compile it. You could actually use some other languages too. But anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but Java Server Pages and Servlets was created to be able to use the full blown functionality of the entire Java language. Unlike ASP, the old ASP from 1996 to whenever, we used it for a number of years, but that just used VB script, and it was a scripting language. But when Java Server Pages and Servlets came out, it was a whole new technology that had the complete power of Java behind it. Now here you'll notice that, again, line 22 is saying that we're going to point to test input. Be careful, the I is capitalized. Test, capital I, input, and when you point to it, it has to be here, line 104, test, capital I, input. Otherwise, it won't find it. Notice we're mixing some HTML, which is treated as string data, with our actual Java. Notice out print line here, and that's really Java Server Pages coding convention here. And it's setting the content type of text HTML. So we're really printing out a table here is what we're doing. And it's going to print out the name, the values of the names and the values themselves. What am I saying? Well, in this form, okay, in this form, the controls have name attributes. I went through this in a prior video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but here, look at the first one. The name attribute is fname, and then the value has a value. So name fname, name lname, name street, and when the user populates it, they all have values, or they should have values. And this is where our applications will sometimes go awry when we're trying to put this data or modify or delete the data from a database using this web interface and things aren't going as expected. This is why you use these utilities. So let's compile this. You'll notice that only my customer servlet is compiled. I need to compile servlet utilities and show parameters. I don't need to compile test servlet right now because that was for an older assignment. But as I mentioned, when I compile show parameters, it requires servlet utilities, as you see right here. Look at line 30. See, it's requiring that the servlet utilities servlet is already compiled as well too. So we need servlet utilities. All right, so with that said, All I'm going to do is I'm going to compile show parameters, and I already have it right there, ready to go. And what I'm going to pull up on the side here is to show you, watch what happens, that not only will show parameters be compiled, but so will servlet utilities. So I'm going to hit enter, and notice to the right that both servlet utilities and show parameters have been compiled. Why? Because show parameters used servlet utilities in its code. And so we had to use that in the code. And I even have there on line 1, Node also uses servlet utilities.java servlet. So, okay, we compiled it. We actually don't need to see this anymore. If you want to check this out, you can. You can look at the code and play with it. What I want to draw your attention to right here now is all this is going to do is get the names of each one of the controls, and then the respective values for each one of the controls. So I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to keep this one open so you can see. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. All right. So I'm going to put in here John, just some dummy data in here. Let me actually refresh this. Okay, and then put the data again here. And 100, 200, and testing. Okay. And my Tomcat is running in the background already. All right, let's see if this works. So all I did was I saved this customer form, and you could use this on any form, by the way, gang, any form for testing purposes. Just change it to the path to make sure that your servlet is in the appropriate spot, and then just put it to test input. There is one other thing that I forgot to tell you, and this happens for both servlet utilities and show parameters. You cannot put this just in any folder. Remember, gang, we talked about packages before. In this particular situation, it must be in classes. That's the first starting point, the classes folder, and then the package CRUD, and then the secondary package admin. Why? Because of this. This is the, look at line 2. We're saying this is where this file can be found. The show parameters.java file, the servlet, can be found in this package starting from classes. And I talked about this in assignment 5, so you can refer back to the discussion there that we had in assignment number 5. But that's why we have line 2. So this will not work unless you change line 2. You can't put it anywhere. It must be, for now, in our CRUD, and then in our secondary. So it starts in classes, then CRUD, and then it must be, because we have this package line 2, it must be in admin. Okay, close out of that, and then let's run this. I hit submit. It says can't find it. I can't find test input. Well, we have it running. Let's do this. Let's shut down Tomcat, start it up again, and there we go. It's shutting down, and I'm going to start it up. See how everything is running right now. Any issues? Looks good so far, and it's up and running. I'm going to hit the back arrow, and I'm going to hit refresh. Let's try this again. Populate it. 100, 200, and my testing for cross-site scripting. There we go, and submit. There it is, right there. Let me make it larger, and let's take a look at this. Now, what this is going to show are all the name properties, including action. Action. Action is not add customer. Action is test input. Actually, it's not. Action, in this particular situation, is the name of one of the name attributes. Let's take a look. It's in the hidden field right here, line 106. Notice it says here, name action. Now, don't get that confused with the line 104, the actual action attribute for the form element. It has nothing to do with that. This actually has to do with the code that we're using in assignment 5 and project 2. And that is, what is the action? The action is to add a customer. What is the action? The action is to modify a customer. What is the action? The action is to delete a customer. And that's why that was named action. But it could be named anything as long as the rest of the code was changed. Don't do that though. But if I change this to something else, right? Say I changed it to instead of action, we'll say testing. Okay, testing, just for grins and giggles. And I'll save that. I'll go back here. I'll refresh it. Actually, wouldn't even have to refresh it. But then I'll just repopulate it. And now watch what happens here. It's going to pick up the new name attribute. See, it says testing. Okay. And again, that's from here. That's all that's doing is grabbing that. Okay, so I'm going to put that back to action because that's the actual value for the name property. And then notice it says add customer. If I use this on a modify page, it would say update customer. If I use this on a delete link, it would say delete customer. That would be the action here. So if I go back here and submit again, yeah, I have to refresh it. So let's do that. I'm going to refresh this and then just populate it so you can see the action name there. And okay, and submit. There it is, back to action. Look at the other ones in the left column. So F name, L name, street, city, state, zip. Notice the values, John, Doe, 123 Main Street, etc., etc. So it's picking up all of the name values. So name F name, name L name, name street, name city. Even, by the way, even the submit button. Look at the submit button here. Name, sign up. Value, okay, there it is for the submit button. Name is sign up. Look what it says, sign up. And the value was here, sign up, right? Value, sign up. Okay? Now, why is this beneficial, gang? Well, it's beneficial like this. Oh, by the way, it didn't prevent cross-site scripting because the servlet show parameters doesn't test for cross-site scripting. It doesn't use the Java Server Pages tag library like we're using in assignments 4 or 5 and project 2. So notice how it processed that bold value of testing. And in our application, we don't want it to do that, but this is just for testing purposes only. Now, why is that important? Well, because you want to make sure that you're getting the correct names for each one of the controls. Like sometimes students will forget that total sales has to be total underscore sales, not a second here, not total space sales. So again, if we ran this and we refreshed it and ran it again, you'd see that when we did the testing, that something was not correct, because in our um, process page, the servlet that we're using for assignment 5 and project 2, it can't be total sales. We won't get the correct return on that. It won't capture the data that the user entered for this, which is 200, because in our process page of the servlet that's actually the customer admin, the actual servlet that we're using, customer admin here, which we have in line 103 now, is not looking for total space sales. It's looking, and you can't have a space, by the way. You need to capture it with an underscore. There's ways to be able to have spaces in your names, but it's a lot easier if you don't do that. So then you won't have to worry about spaces or issues involving spaces. But you want to use this for testing to make sure the names are correct, and then the values are correct as well too. Are you getting values from each one of these? Okay. You might have, like for instance, you miss, and I believe me, I've seen this before, gang. Uh, Someone may have misspaced or mistyped value in one of their controls, right? Or mistyped name. I've seen it like this, Nane, right? So let's try to run this again. We'll save this. We'll refresh our page again and see what happens when we put a known error in there and how it's processed. So before, there were no errors in there, right? But now we know we have an error. We go back here, 100, 200, keep the same data, and then submit it. And it's like, okay, L name, street, city, state, zip, total sales, that's incorrect. I got to fix that. But where's my first name? The user entered a first name. How come the first name is not there? So you got to go back again. This is how you go back and just do some debugging. So I'm going to correct this. I'm going to make sure that the name is correct, the value is correct. I also got to check that the test total underscore sales is correct as well too. So I fixed that. I'm going to go back here and refresh it, put the values in again, and let's see now how my application's working. I'm hoping to get all of the data so that we can do further testing. And let me just go back here and submit it again. And now I can see that I have all my data in here, including the hidden form. It's passing the correct value, add underscore customer, all the values for each one of my controls, even the submit button. Okay? All right, gang, I hope this was helpful. So all you have to do is compile the show parameters, show utilities will, servlet utilities will automatically compile inside of your form, whatever form that you're using. Here for us, it's the customer form. Just change customer admin in the form element there and the action to test input, and everything will work. When you're done testing, just make sure, don't forget to change that back so that the it's no longer test input, back to customer admin, and then you could put this back up here like this because it's just a comment, and then save it. Okay? All right, gang, I hope this was helpful. See you all in class.